in the penitentiary system across Canada. Mr. Speaker, I do want to say that, when this bill came about, I reached out to the correctional workers in my riding and had a chance to actually tour the facility with them. And they had a chance to see firsthand what they deal with. And these are some of the most courageous people that I know. Their mental ruggedness, their physical stamina is something I definitely could not do, and I really appreciate the work they do and how they are there to protect Canadians and deal with some of the worst in our society. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that they brought to my attention right off the bat was the lack of consultations. They weren't involved in the process, in the creation of what the requirements were needed to improve the facilities. You got to understand, Mr. Speaker, these facilities are very old. They've been around for generations and generations, built in the 60s and 70s. They have processes in place based off experience and knowing what they're dealing with. And I'll give you a good example of that, Mr. Speaker. When I first started the tour in the facility, they took me into one of the rooms and gave me an overview briefing. And they talked about the different types of gangs and groups of criminals they had within their facility. And they talked about how they worked with the RCMP and special crimes units to identify these people, and so that when these people are in the facility, they know exactly where they are and who they're mingling and mixing with at all times. They know that one group can't mix with the other group. They also know that group 3 can't mix with group 4, but maybe with group 2 on certain days. They are aware of not only what's happening within the penitentiary amongst these different groups, they're aware of what's going on outside the penitentiary with these different groups, which has implications for how they treat them within the facility. One of the things that came to light in this C-83 was the change from segregated confinement or solitary confinement to getting rid of volunteer solitary confinement. And one of the safety issues they brought up right away is said, you know what, there is some prisoners in this facility who have fallen out with their group or with their gang who really want this and really need this. But not having the ability to get it now is going to put them in a predicament. And what they're concerned about, and I think it's a very real concern, is they're going to still get it. It's just they're going to assault an officer or a guard to get it, because they know they need to do it in order to be safe for themselves. So by taking this away, it sounds good on paper, but in practicality, they've actually created a situation that's even more unsafe for our officers and our guards. You know, there has to be some consultations when you're doing this so that you can see things like this are brought to light, and then you can maybe think of a different way in how to treat it and how to handle it. But no, this Liberal government doesn't like to consult. No matter what they said when they were elected, they don't do it, especially when the consultation doesn't give them the answer that they want. They want to take the suggestions and the solutions from Ottawa and shove them down on people who actually have to work with them. And it's those people that have to work with them that pay for these guys' mistakes. They pay for it with financial costs, they pay for it for their physical harm and their safety, and that's not right. And that's why I'm so disappointed in this government for not actually understanding that and recognizing that and taking a step back and saying, okay, what do we have to do to make sure we do this right? No, we're going to ram it through because we know best. We're Liberals. We know best. You've got 30 years experience. What do you know? I've been elected for 2 years. We know best. That's the Liberal mindset, and it's wrong, and they need to change it. Mr. Speaker, some of the other things they popped up in the tour was the facility, again, built in the 60s and 70s. They're going to put body scanners in. Sounds great. They're happy to have that. They want that. That's great. But they say, okay, first problem, where do we put it? These are cement structures. They have solid walls. You just not just take a sledgehammer and say, hey, we're just going to knock this wall out and we'll put it in here and away we go. No, this is a major construction problem. Then the second problem they have is they don't have the power requirements. You're going, what? Again, these are older facilities. They don't have the wiring, they don't have the infrastructure to handle something as simple as a body scanner. So now you look at that and say, okay, well, obviously the government's going to put money aside to do that. Well, wait a minute, there's nothing in the budget for that. So how are they going to do that? We don't know. There's been no game plan, and we've heard from the members across the House say, well, just trust us. Well, we've heard that once too often from this government, just trust us. Because usually that means they don't know, they're not sure, we're going to do it anyways, and Canadian taxpayers will pick up the bill no matter what it costs. Where if they would have just took a step back and said, well, what do you guys think would be the best way to implement this? They probably would have got a reasonable and logical solution that would have had the same results and saved the taxpayers a lot of money and made it safer for our guards. So there's one example of what they haven't done. They talk about solitary confinement and the 4 hours where these members or these prisoners are going to be allowed outside their facilities, mingling again amongst each other. Again, these facilities weren't made that way. They weren't made to handle that situation. And if I go back to my original comments about how they have been very careful in planning who's out in the yard with who's mingling with who, for their own safety, for the guards' safety, and for the prisoners' safety, that's all structured and very carefully managed. But now you're regulating the fact that they have to break that groups up. So all of a sudden you've got two gangs who are just going to get out in the yard, look at each other, and beat the crap out of each other. And what's going to also happen is that 2 guards or 3 guards are going to intercept that, try to break it up, and get hurt in the process too. You know, it's just crazy. The lack of practicality from this government is just scary. Yet they're going to ram it through because we're liberals. We know best. You know, Mr. Speaker, it's really disheartening when you go through these facilities. You just go, wow. I would never want to be in one. I know we joked about, well, here's the cell for the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Trudeau. You know, there's where he's going to end up after the SNC Lavalin stuff. You know, there's his place. Nobody ever wants to be there, that's for sure. And the people that are there are bad people. You know, the other thing I have to mention, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that these guards every day go to work, and a lot of them haven't been paid. A lot of them haven't received their bonuses or their increase in pays, changing on shifts, and they don't even get the shift differential if they go from one part of the penitentiary to the other. And again, this government, instead of looking for solutions and trying to find a way to fix this for these guards, they put their head in the sand and just say, take it. Just amazing, just take it. The disrespect they have for our public employees is just phenomenal. And again, it shows up in this piece of legislation, and it shows up in the Phoenix pay system, and it's shown up in so many other ways in which this government has treated our employees and Canadian citizens. And it has to change. And the good news is, Madam Speaker, on October 20th, it will change. And the guards will understand that they'll actually have somebody in power, a Conservative government under Andrew Scheer in power, that will have their backs. So thank you, Madam Speaker. I look forward to the questions.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Guelph.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Where to start with a speech like that? And thanks to the honourable member for providing some fiction and entertainment this afternoon. But when you look at what the previous government did between 2012 and 2015, cutting $300 million from Corrections Canada, and now he's saying that our prisons are in terrible shape. Why could that be, Madam Speaker? How could that happen when you're jamming 2 inmates into a cell designed for 1, or cutting 30% inmate pay while you're skyrocketing canteen costs? The tough on crime agenda, mandatory minimum sentences, flooding 1,500 prisoners into cells that weren't designed for 1,500 cellmates. So the investment that we're making today, Madam Speaker, the $448 million going into our correctional facilities, could the honourable member not at least acknowledge that that might help undo some of the disastrous cuts from the previous government?
The honourable member for Prince Albert.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. But the reality is C-83 is going to generate so much more costs that the $480 million won't even touch it. And they know that. But they're going to do it anyways. They don't care. They know best. They're from Ottawa. They can tell everybody what else to do in Canada. And we see it in their attitude. We see it, the arrogance in their faces. Reality is they have to make some structural changes in a building that was built in 1960s, 70s, and that building will not allow them to do what they want them to do under C-83. Not safely. So what happens? The guard's safety comes into play because they're put in a situation in a facility that wasn't created to do what they want it to do. Who pays? The guards do, not these members. The guards pay, and that's not right.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And through you, Madam Speaker, the member that just spoke has a prison facility in his area. I know he mentioned during his speech that he's toured the facility. He's seen the good parts and the bad parts. He's seen, talked to the guards, he's talked to the prisoners, as I have with my institution at Grand Cache. Now, my institution is quite a beautiful one. It's on top of a mountain. has about 350 employees and about 300 prisoners. But these are older facilities, and I do not believe the government of the day has taken into consideration some of the changes that are going to need to be required regarding health care, regarding scanning facilities and that stuff, and that you just can't do it on some of the older buildings. We tried it with this one. It took a lot of modification. I don't believe they put enough money out for the budget. If you would care to answer that through you.
The honourable member for Prince Albert.
And I thank the member for his hard work, some practicality in the committee that was ignored as it went through the committee, obviously. You know, like, again, it comes back to the realities here. These facilities are older facilities that are designed based on processes that have been developed over years and years of experience of guards. You know, so that's the way they've been working. Now, if we want to change that, that's fine. But do the proper consultations, do the proper analysis, sit back and actually talk to the guards, talk to those that are impacted, talk to some of the prisoners. You got to remember, Madam Speaker, there's the worst of the worst, but there's some people that are in there for things like drunk driving or petty theft that, you know, basically, hopefully they will be rehabilitated and will leave the facilities. But you know, the way they're handling this, they're putting the guards at risk, and that's not right. They've ignored them. They haven't talked to them. And by doing that, it's just wrong. Their act safety is at stake, and I don't understand that. This is a government that came into power saying we're going to consult. Well, they only consult when the people say what they want to hear. In this situation, they weren't saying what they wanted to hear, so they just ram it through anyways, which is really unfortunate.
We have time for a brief question. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, a brief question.
Very brief, Madam Speaker. And, you know, I have to ask the question, where was the compassion towards correctional officers when Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister, when that government did absolutely nothing in terms of reforming and trying to improve the quality of living, both for security and other professionals that are working our fine institutions?
Brief answer from the member for Prince Albert.
Well, that's rich coming from this government that's ignored them totally altogether and basically said, we know best. Reality is they've ignored them worse. They're doing a worse job. They're putting our guards in harm's way. They were never in harm's way under the Harper government. They are now. They're speaking out. They're upset, and they're not listening. And that's unfortunate. They should be listening. Really just...
Comme il est 10h30, la Chambre abordera maintenant l'étude des affaires émanant des députés selon l'ordre indiqué au feuilleton aujourd'hui. Orders of the day, ordre du jour.
Orders of the day, private members' business. Second reading of Bill C-406, an act to amend the Canada Elections Act, foreign contributions, in the name of Mr. Calkins.